Well, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to see everybody here this morning. When I was in Japan, I went to a restaurant, and I was having dinner there with some friends, and I happened to look over at a table not far away, and I noticed a little old man who was finishing up his meal, and I kind of just got intrigued by him because I noticed that as he finished, he took his napkin and he kind of fluffed it a couple times and he began folding it very meticulously. And then he set it on the table and he was lining up the corners and continued folding. And he was very slow and methodical in his movements. And he was very present and very purposeful. And it totally engaged me, totally intrigued me. And I watched him finish all of this. And then finally he took it and he set it very gently on top of his teacup. And then he gathered his stuff and he left. So there's no punchline or moral other than the fact that his intense presence and mindfulness in this simple task just totally, I remember it to this day very vividly. Another story, on the last day of a 5-day retreat, my teacher instructed us to strip the beds and then remake them. And then he said, and as you remake the bed, I want you to invite the sacred. And I'm like, okay. So I went to the little room. It was a sequestered or residential retreat. And so I began making the bed, and I'm putting the pillow in the pillowcase and kind of waiting for, kind of inviting the sacred. Okay, where are you, sacred? And I was mindful, like I'm placing the pillow in the pillowcase. You know, I'm grabbing the new sheets. So there was mindfulness was there, presence was there, but I was still kind of like going, I don't know that I've invited the sacred. I'm present, I'm mindful, I'm very well aware of what I'm doing. I notice thoughts about past or future that might arise, but still no sacred. So then I decided to stop, take a few conscious breaths. I sat down on the bed for a second, and I just did kind of a short meditation. After 5 days in silence, it didn't take long. And all of a sudden, what arose in me was an embodiment, a feeling. There were no thoughts associated with this. This was simply a sense in the body, and it felt warm, bright. It felt like love. And what I realized in the meditation was that love was arising in making the bed for the person who was going to sleep in it tomorrow. And then behind that arose additional love from the people who had made the bed that I had failed to see when I arrived 5 days ago. In that moment, making the bed became a ritual. And there was the sacred. Jack Kornfield says that human beings are meaning-making creatures. We need to find meaning or we are lost. There is an innate impulse in us to look at the mystery that surrounds us, to try to honor it in some deep way. One way to do that is through the ancient language of ritual. In essence, ritual is about bringing the sacred into our lives. And before I go any further, I don't want you to think that that's somewhere out there. It's almost more of an uncovering of the sacred in our lives. It is within us. And in that, we are honoring something greater than you and I. Honoring that mystery, that divine force that moves through all things. It moves the plant to flower, it moves the wolf to howl, and it's what enlightens the face of a baby. as we become aware of this higher force moving in our lives, in, through, and around our lives, and we express gratitude for it, it expands and colors our daily life with radiance, connecting us to all things. So take for a moment, or before I go to that, I want to take just one step back and to take a look at that meaning. What meaning do you bring to walking the dog? What meaning do you bring to doing the dishes? What meaning do you bring to driving to work or getting out of bed? These are some of the questions that we are invited to go inside and examine. When things become meaningless, automatic, and just a task, we become human doings and not human beings. That's one of our greatest gifts, is to bring meaning to the most simplest of tasks, making the bed, and imbuing it with love for the person that will be resting there tomorrow. Or I could just make the bed and throw stuff on there and be annoyed because breakfast is waiting for me downstairs. So you see that slippery slope. When everything becomes that way, then we wonder why we suffer. We wonder why our lives seem kind of hollow, kind of shallow, not very happy. So consider now for just a moment the Anjali Mudra. The Anjali Mudra, a very common ritual in Buddhist practices. In fact, you'll find it in many practices. It is integral to many traditions, in fact. The Anjali Mudra is really much more than just going like this and trying to say hi to somebody or let them know that you don't actually want a hug, so you put your hands out in front of you. And sometimes that's important and necessary, right? But there's so much more when we don't just go through the rote motions and we realize the depth of the ritual. There's so much involved. The Anjali Mudra begins with returning us to our heart. For starters, returning to the heart. It literally brings together the two hemispheres of the brain. In the yogic tradition, this is a unification of mind. The yoking of active and receptive natures within the body, nourishing the energetic heart, which is seen as a lotus. And subsequently, this can often be considered the bud of a lotus. And in many traditions, they'll open their hands a little bit like this and symbolically place in the center a seed. Perhaps the seed of clarity, the seed of peace. In some yogic traditions, they'll place in the center of the Anjali Mudra their own personal connection to the divine, and it's held right here in the heart. In other traditions, the Anjali Mudra is an intense focusing of the heart energy, like a magnifying glass and the sun. And what's interesting is that this is the most common part of the Anjali Mudra, but what you don't realize is the approach. We don't just, when you approach the Anjali Mudra, your hands are open and there is a gathering of ancestral energy. If not your own ancestors, then just your own lifetimes, and bringing that all here. So there is really an approach to it. Open hands, coming together, marshaling all of that divine energy and bringing and focusing. And in many different traditions, it also means the divine in me sees the divine in you. My light sees your light. So it's not just a... And I'm guilty of the same thing. I've caught myself, oh, right, yeah. And I reduce this to a simple motion and have taken from it the meaning, the depth, the ritual, the sacred. Ritual experiences rituals express many dimensions of our human condition, including our relationship to others and to our spiritual life. Actions done with other beings create shared values, create community, create support. As a way of being mindful, ritual can bring a heightened awareness to aspects of our experience. I love Thich Nhat Hanh, who talks about getting in the car, and he's very mindful about the process, opening the door, attaching the seat belt, caring for this human form, closing the door, and he says at that moment he takes a breath, and in that breath he and the car become one. If the car goes fast, he goes fast. They have become one. There is a union there, an invitation to the sacred. Ritual often involves symbolism, and it speaks to our subconscious. When ritual is repeated frequently, it can even shape our general dispositions. When done wholeheartedly, ritual helps us to express some of our deepest feelings and aspirations. I did a little experiment with my mom's dog. Her name's Abby. Every time I go and visit my mom's house, Abby and I have this ritual. She will come running up, and then she jumps on me, and then falls over backwards with her feet in the air, ready for a tummy rub. And she gets the tummy rub, and we do that for about 1 minute, and then she jumps up, runs and grabs one of her stuffed toys, and we do exactly 3 minutes of tug-of-war with lots of noises. And then she's fine, and she walks off. She's done. So I tried a little experiment. I wondered what would happen if I just walked into Mom's house and then just went about doing things, talking to Mom, stuff like that, and ignored Abby. Oh my God, you would have thought I killed her. She actually went and hid under the bed. And I checked this to make sure it wasn't something else, like maybe I had the smell of another dog or something, and I did it a second time, and the exact same thing happened. And I will never do that again, because wow, how important this sacred ritual is to Abby, and subsequently has become important to me. It's connection. It's a subtle manifestation that everything's okay. Look at the fear in our lives right now. As a society, we have been releasing and letting go ritual, connection, symbolism, and meaning. And from that develops an uneasiness because we don't dance together, chant together, sit in noble silence together as a society, as communities. So even in children, you can see that an element of ritual brings calm, brings ease, brings a symbolic sense of oneness and that everything is all right. Rituals can be as ordinary as simply greeting people with the handshake or the Anjali Mudra, or they can be as absolutely extraordinary as an elaborate memorial ceremony that brings deep healing to grief, to loss. Rituals can transform the ordinary into something extraordinary, as when people share a blessing before a meal, as when Sangha sits together in noble silence. People often ask me, they're like, Victor, why is it that I can go home and sit for 15 minutes, but I do not have the experience that I have when I come and I sit together in silence? There's your answer. It is a shared ritual. It is an invitation to the sacred. Ritual can, as in the same way that rituals can transform ordinary into something extraordinary, ritual can also transform the extraordinary when universal compassion is regularly awakened through daily prayer, chanting, and study of sacred texts. What I'm talking about there is that we sit on the cushion and we meditate, we watch our thoughts, we experience Sangha, and we read, watch videos, and are looking for truth. Our practice prepares us in itty-bitty little tiny ways for those extraordinary moments in life. Death, the loss of a loved one, or the loss of a valued relationship. Then we are more prepared. There's a safety net. Not that sometimes we don't need to fall apart, because we do. That's a part of waking up. But it's nice to have something to fall into. A ritual, a sense of the sacred. At times, rituals can be incredibly transformative, as I just said. The combination of setting and intention, a heightened focus, emotional involvement, and embodied participation can enhance the effect that rituals have. At times, they can help people heal, they can help people develop, and complete psychological and spiritual processes better than almost any other method. This is particularly true in times of great crisis. So, a quick note. Many folks in Buddhist practice reference that the adherence to rituals and rites is expressly written about in the sacred texts, and that is sometimes considered a hindrance because it is an attachment to a ritual. But I would like to point out that in the Western translation, it is adherence to precepts and religious observance, which is a much broader category than rites and rituals. It is as important as precepts and religious observances are in Buddhism. They alone cannot liberate people. To rely on them for liberation is a hindrance. So the Buddha's concern was with the attachment, not the ritual. Rituals can have an important role for many reasons, not the least of which is preparing the ground for deep letting go of what is required for liberation. Therefore, one important function of Buddhist rituals is to strengthen people's connection to the Dharma and ultimately to each intention that arises. Intentions are not primarily thoughts or motivations. They're a deeper root. An intention, you can have the intention to reach for something and not have a thought about it. You just reach for it. Behind everything there is an intention. And this is one of the things that a deep practice and mindfulness can help reveal for us. What is our intention behind the pat on the back? What is our intention behind a phone call or a word said to a friend? Looking deeply, we can uncover that and subsequently uncover the nature of our mind. I would like to close by letting you know that on the music stand in the back, I've placed a sheet there written by Gil Fronsdal, a very popular teacher out at Spirit Rock, who talks about how to create ritual, how to create ritual at home, what the beginning or the opening process of a ritual is, what the middle part of a ritual is, and what the ending part of a ritual is. Breaking it down. So you are invited to take one of those home for you to help create some ritual at home. Many of our Sangha members will create little altars at home where they will place various things, perhaps something from nature to remind us of our connection with all things, perhaps a picture or a photograph of a loved one or a relative, reminding us of our connection, again, with all beings. So the invitation, and you don't have to go that far, but the invitation is ultimately to invite the sacred, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, to kiss the earth with every step. So I want to close with this from the book The Elegance of the Hedgehog by Muriel Barberry. When tea becomes ritual, it takes its place at the heart of our ability to see greatness in small things. Where is beauty to be found? In great things that, like everything else, are doomed to die, or in small things that aspire to nothing, yet know how to set a jewel of infinity in a single moment.